Welcome back to Music Theory Logic. My name's Andrew, and today is going to be a music theory breakdown. We're going to be looking at Awful Things by the late, great Lil Peep. Let's go ahead into the logic session. So Lil Peep, rest in peace. If you're not familiar with him, he was a smash hit success of the sort of SoundCloud rap era, 2017, 2018, I believe. He kind of pioneered this sound, which I could describe as punk rock meets like sort of rock instrumentals. I'm sure lots of people have done this, but Lil Peep was the first artist that I heard that was originally a rapper, that when I finally heard this track, it sounded to me more like punk rock. Shout out to my former student, Jack, who showed me this. All right, let's go ahead and play this. If you find these helpful, you'd help me out a ton by subscribing to the channel. You're going to hear my recreation of the instrumental. We're not playing any of the actual song to respect the copyright. Here we go. All right. So obviously it's not as exciting without the vocals, but again, we don't play the original tracks. You should go ahead and listen to that original if you haven't heard it in a while. Perhaps you're finding this video after hearing that song, remembering how much you like it. So I'm going to try to keep this pretty fast. This is going to give us a chance to talk about a lot of more complicated harmonies or combination of notes. This song was produced by the Invisible Men, or the instrumental guitar work was at least by the Invisible Men. There's a lot of different names on the credits. But it starts with the guitar riff. Now, I played the guitar riff. I tried to get it as close to the original as possible. So the guitar is in a drop D tuning. Everything's normal aside from the low E string is a low D string, so a whole step down. Then capoing at the second fret. Excuse me, that basically makes the rest of the guitar in like an F sharp minor open tuning, and then that second fret on the E string or the D string makes it an E. All of that to be said that the chords we're going to talk about are complicated, but they're not necessarily complicated when writing this on the guitar because we can use our ear and because we're relying on some open string technique. So to get into the music theory, we could describe this song as being in the key of C sharp minor. C sharp minor is the same scale as E major, Both those scales have 4 sharps. The sharps are C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, and G sharp. If we play C sharp minor, it sounds like this. Again, that's C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp. If we take that same scale and we start from the third note, from E, and we end on E, that is its relative major, a fancy way of saying the major scale that has exactly the same notes. It sounds like this. All right, cool. Let's get into the chords, and then I'm gonna kind of breeze through the rest of the stuff because this instrumental is quite simple. The main thing that makes this song super unique to my ears is the guitar in it. So the fundamental harmonies that we're hearing on the guitar. The first one I'm going to call a C sharp minor 7 sus 4. It's a really fancy sounding chord. It has these 4 notes: C sharp, F sharp, G sharp, and B. So in essence, these 3 notes are what make this a C sharp minor 7th. And instead of the E, the actual minor third from the chord, we're getting the 4th from the scale. So F sharp would be the 4th note. So we would call that a sus 4. Sus, when we say chords are sus, that's short for suspended. That comes from a basically older technique where if we were writing counterpoint, we might resolve a harmony in a second measure than expected. That means that harmony we're resolving is suspended. In modern pop music writing, they're kind of like different chord flavors. The next one is an E5 add 9. It's kind of a weird chord. It's basically an E5, that's an E power chord, E and B together. We're then adding the 9 E F sharp. F sharp would be the second note from the scale. So you see 4 notes, but the B is getting repeated. This is E, B, F sharp, and B on top. Cool. We then get almost the exact same chord we got at first, only we have it over everything happening the same on top of an E on the bass. This E in the bass is the 3rd that's filling out. That's what makes this a full C sharp minor 7. It still has that suspended 4th. And then finally, we're going back to the same chord we had. That's an E5 add 9. So lots of numbers. I understand that. For when we're writing music on a computer, writing suspended chords it's somewhat simple. You could take, let's say, the C sharp minor triad, which would be those notes. Let's give ourselves some more MIDI. So C sharp, E, and G sharp. And then the simplest way to think about it is in the next octave, if we move these notes up an octave, this would be a 9. So if I drag that over, this is a C sharp minor 9. A very pretty harmony. If I drag our E over, that's already in our chord. If I drag an F sharp, that's a suspended 4th. We could call that an 11 in jazz harmony. So one of the things about music in general, one of the reasons to understand some theory is just so that you can talk to other people that make music and you can better understand what they're saying about your music and you can better communicate what's in your own head about music. One difference to recognize is that a lot of people that play acoustic guitars are going to call a C sharp minor when they add the F sharp a suspended 4th. Jazz people are going to call that an 11th. In essence, if we go up here, C sharp, this would be 8, so an octave. D sharp would be 9, E would be the 10, F sharp is the 11th. And again, same fundamental thing. Some people might argue that, oh no, when people say a suspended 4, they are talking specifically about the voicing. This is a broad statement in my history working with a bunch of different kinds of musicians. Sometimes when people say add an 11, they don't necessarily mean the 11 is fully on the top, the highest sounding. That could actually be the harmony, a quicker way of describing it. All right, going through all of our other parts, I charted this out in the MIDI guitar. It looks like a bunch of stacks of notes. We basically get the chords I mentioned. So those are all the notes that I mentioned already with the chords. The one other thing to mention is this riff that happens at the very end. That's going C sharp, D sharp, back to C sharp. So 1 2 1 in the key of C sharp, or 6 7 6 in the key of E major. Cool. The fundamental chord progression that's happening is a C sharp minor. So in the key of E major, this would be a 6, a B major down to a 5, and then a 1 chord. Those full harmonies are really low in the mix. We're really mainly hearing the guitar riff and the bass. The bass line is going to highlight the same chords I just showed you. Let's talk just broadly about how guitar players write this. You could picture a guitar. If somebody's holding a guitar and they're using their left hand, they're pressing down notes. Chords that you can play without pressing all the strings and have open strings are called open chords. In essence, any chord that I'm playing, like this G major, if you can see that, if I were to lift up these notes, all of a sudden I'm playing open strings that weren't intended to be in the chord. That is a way to stumble across extended harmonies. A band that comes to mind with the song Everlong is the Foo Fighters. I've been around music and teaching guitar for quite some time, and that's been a popular one over the years. And in essence, that chord has some really interesting harmonies, but it's not necessarily that they're as sophisticated or crazy as they sound. It's really just playing a simple power chord, but having open strings as well. You can write this by ear if you play guitar. You can also write this by ear, like I showed you in the beginning, just by knowing what key you're in and adding notes. You can also do it totally by ear. All of this music theory stuff is just a shortcut for things that we can also determine with our ears. It's kind of what makes it so magical. All right, so the song starts. We get that main guitar riff. Then we get the same 4-bar guitar riff that happens. We get this drum fill. The drum fill basically has a crash cymbal followed by the snare. We've got some syncopation in there. Syncopation in music theory is displacing the downbeat or the accent. So we're hitting on like the 4th, 16th notes. This is really just a cool drum fill. You can do these by ear. The last 4 are muted right before that full drop comes in. Now this drum fill, this 4-bar phrase, happens throughout the song. It's basically added to the groove at times to make it more interesting. All right, moving along, this is where our hook starts. Lil Peep starts singing Awful Things. Really, really epic point in the song. It's epic for a few reasons. We get our bass that's added, this sub. The sub line is basically doing the same main low notes I mentioned in the beginning. It's doing a C sharp for our C sharp minor. It's doing a B for the second half of our C sharp minor 7 sus4. B is technically the minor 7th. We could also think of this as the 5 in the key of E major. Then we come down to E. Just like our snare pattern, we have a lot of syncopation happening here. It's also not perfect. That's something that is really cool, especially in this style where it's somewhat minimal and you have a really hot 808. If you put certain hits out of time, it's going to feel a lot more like somebody programmed it on an APC or a drum machine where they're hitting the drum pads. All of this hip-hop drum groove stuff started with drum machines and sampling, so it makes sense that this sound still sounds or still is very relevant to the genre. Cool. Let's look at the bass while that plays. Cool. Now, with any groove, really, anytime there's a drum sounds and low-end bass sounds, the drummer, the low part of the drum kit, which in most cases of popular music is going to be a kick drum, the kick drum and the bass line go along together. In reality, the bass guitar or the bass instrument is part of the rhythm section. So you really are always going to have a close relationship between those things. And if we look at the drums, literally the kick drum pattern is almost identical to our 808 pattern. Pretty wild. All right. Now, let's see. Let's just play that whole section again. Cool. That brings us to this next section, the only other guitar section that's happening in the song. We get two slight different versions of the same thing. This is an arpeggio. It's using the same chords that we had before. So this is our C sharp minor 7 sus 4 in second inversion. So it's got the G sharp in the bass. The notes are going G sharp, D sharp, E, B. So I guess we could also call that a G sharp minor chord with an E added. So that would be like a sus 6, a G minor suspended 6. We then go to our D sharp. So again, we could think about that. We finally get to our C sharp here. So I think of this all as really an arpeggio of the exact same thing we have in the beginning of the guitar. The difference is that the melody line is walking down our relative minor. We could again also have called this all in the key of C sharp minor. Just changes the way we define the chords. So the top notes are going E, D sharp, C sharp, back to D sharp. And then finally we come down to our E chord. We get an E, a B, up to a G sharp. So finally we get a full E major sound. Cool. That's a verse section. Sorry for the super loud crash cymbals. That verse section, when we get to Lil Tracy, the feature in this song, which would be right here, we get the arpeggio again. It's almost the same exact section. The difference is that it's drawn out. So instead of going from our C sharp minor for 2 measures, then going to the E for 2 measures, we do 6 whole measures of the same C sharp minor arpeggio riff. One of the differences is that the bass note, we're going down to an F sharp. So we go G sharp down to F sharp. Since that note is the suspended 4th that I've been talking about this whole time, I'm not going to describe that as being a different chord. I think of it as really the same section, just drawn out. So we had 2 of them. Now we have 3 times 2, which is 6 measures. Then we go to the E major arpeggio. That's exactly the same as we found in the previous verse. Just comes after something different. Then finally, we go straight back into the main guitar riff. Now, most of what you're hearing is the actual guitar that I played. I just chart these in so that we can see the notes. So if you wanted to, you could say pause the video here and look at all of the different notes. Once again, it seems a lot more complicated when you hear like a C sharp minor 7 suspended 4th in second inversion. That sounds so crazy, but that's just a way of describing a chord with a lot more complicated notes in it than just a C sharp minor chord or an E major chord. Once again, you can do these by ear. If you just make a minor chord and then you start adding notes to it, you can start to hear how that changes the actual thing. So like a C sharp minor. We could add the 9. Again, pretty cool. That makes it diminished sounding. Cool. So hopefully you found that helpful. Once again, my name's Andrew. This channel is Music Theory Logic. I try to cover all sorts of different topics that I think would be helpful to those of you out there making music, or just people that love music and want to learn more about it. If you found this helpful, you'd help me out a lot by subscribing to the channel. You'll see these music theory breakdowns every Friday, trying to come out with a lot of other relevant content as well. If you have any questions for me, feel free to shoot me an email or leave a comment. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day. Till next time.